busy season, but we're glad to have you here. I hope you came with some ideas that you're thinking about, and then some others that, and I hope you go home with some extra ones as well. Okay, so we'll give it a minute and then we can get started. Everyone got their morning coffee? Waking up still? Yeah.
I've been up since 5.
All right. Andrea, we're going to admit her. Okay. All right. So I thought that we could begin this morning with some prayer. Since there's quite a few of them, I'm gonna ask that we kind of open up the time, and then your chat feature is down below, and I'm gonna ask you to chat in petitions or things for which you're praying in the chat. And then Caroline and Kayla and Sherry, can you jump in and read things that are coming in through the chat when we get to the prayer time? Okay. Thank you, ladies. I appreciate it. All right. So in the midst of the Advent and Christmas season, the text that kind of, at least in my experience, would reemerge over and over and over and over again is the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it, right? We would sing it every week during Holden evening prayer, and it would be what we said on Christmas Eve, right before we dispersed the light in the congregation. So I thought we could begin focusing on that text this morning, kind of give ourselves a breath. It's been a sort of stressful time, right? So allow ourselves to maybe take a breath for a moment, and then I will read the text and then open us up in prayer. And if you have particular petitions, if you open up your chat feature, you can type in what you're praying for, and Caroline and Kayla and Sherry, if you'll read those as they're coming, okay? All right, so let's kind of center ourselves in John, right? The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. Gracious Heavenly Father, we repeat this prayer and remembrance again and again in the midst of the Advent season, that your light shines, and no matter how dark, it never overcomes it. We pray for all those who are in need of your peace this day. We pray for the light that we need to shine. We lift up these particular petitions.
Peaceful resolution to election worries and issues.
For patience as we wait for all the votes to be counted.
For wisdom and understanding.
Healing for those with COVID and virus.
For Nate, Belinda, Allie, Charlie, Sam, and Roger, who are dealing with new COVID cases.
For all those who are lonely and isolated during this time.
For tolerance, respect, and a mutual seeking of unity throughout our lives and our world.
For surprising blessings that may come during Advent.
Gracious God, you whisper to us that your light shines in the darkness and the darkness will never overcome it. Help us to trust in your light. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Great. Thank you. Okay. So just as we're thinking about this time, I wanted to make sure that we have time to interact with each other to share ideas. So I'm sort of thinking of this time as divided into two things. So the first part is some practical dreaming about the season of Christmas and Advent. And then the second part, some resource sharing. What are you planning? What do you like? What are you tinkering with and maybe need some feedback on? And then the end of it, we already started to compile a resource list that's going up on the Synod webpage. And so anything you share, if you put it in the chat, if you have links, if you have ideas, if you want to either email them to me, then we can put that up on that resource page and you can collaborate, because there's no need for all of us to create the same worship service or the same resource, right? If anything, this time allows us to collaborate in maybe some new ways, okay? So if you'll make sure that you're sharing those over chat or even emailing them to me, I'll make sure they get up on that page and that page is available to you, okay? All right, so first off, I think we just have to establish something when we're thinking about Christmas and Advent. When I was a parish pastor, around this time of year, I would always get calls, right, in the parish, and it would be someone trying to sell me something on the other line, and they would say, Pastor Schaff, because they could never say my name, Pastor Schaff, we have the perfect resource for your congregation. And I would want to say back, well, that's really interesting because you've never met my congregation, right? You don't know the people who are in this place. You don't know the context. You don't know what they're struggling with, what they love, what their gifts are. So it's interesting to me that you would have the perfect resource for this congregation. I think we just got to establish from the very beginning that everything we do in this season is contextual. It's always contextual, but even more so now. So there is no one fit, right? There is not one thing that we can give you that just automatically goes. We've got to be looking at what are the restrictions? What are the gifts of our time? If your people aren't going to come to online worship, then that's not how to do it there. Like we have to be contextual to the spaces and the people in which we are working with. So there's always going to have to be some reasonable conversation about that, all right? So then once we start talking about that, right, we can talk about two different things. One I'd like to talk about is adaption, and then the other is innovation, right? So first, I think like we need to talk about adaption, right? So I would like you to pull out the chat again. Can you chat in somewhat? What are the dearly beloved, the sacred things that your community and parish does during Advent and Christmas? You can chat those things in, and ladies, if you would be so kind as to shout them out again, that would be lovely. Midweek meals, I see. Yep.
Singing beloved hymns.
Singing beloved hymns.
Advent candle and wreath.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of candle lighting and hymns, evening services.
Silent night with candle lighting.
Mm-hmm.
Interactive hanging of the green service.
Christmas caroling, Blue Christmas services.
Yep.
Watching the children's program.
Mhm. Food.
Yes. Okay. Any others?
Music.
Music.
Reunion of families and bringing extended family to worship.
Mm.
Singing.
Collections for people in need.
Family reunions. Lessons and carols, both Advent and Christmas. Music.
Angel Tree Ministries.
Mm-hmm.
So
Tradition.
cool, tradition. All right, so once we've started to name like what are some of our beloved things, then we can talk about adaption, right? So I'm gonna give you an example. At the congregation that I served, it was sacred to light candles and sing Silent Night on Christmas Eve. Had to happen, right? I found that I could do all kinds of crazy things during the sermon and nobody batted an eye, but they expected me to sing Silent Night and to light candles on Christmas Eve, right? So, if I were thinking about this year, right, it's not safe for all of us to do that the way we've always done it, right? Standing in a packed a sanctuary with all of us singing would probably not be safe, right? So I would be thinking about how do we adapt this right to work in the context in which we are finding ourselves. So, you could recruit a soloist. And if I were doing it in the congregation that I came from, it would be a young person because people would like that better. It would be a grade school child, like who would sing Silent Night as a soloist in the congregation. Or you could be thinking about how do you stream it over the internet? Would you be streaming it at a particular time where everybody in their individual homes would light a candle together and sing Silent Night? Would you go out on the porch and sing it together in your community and in your neighborhood? Would you gather in a community place? Would you process out of the sanctuary if you are in the sanctuary and sing it in front of the church outdoors so that you can light candles? So these are all exercises of adaptation, right? So you're trying to figure out what is the thing that is sacred? How can we tweak it to do it in the midst of a time where we can't do what we typically had done in the past? Okay, make sense? Thumbs up, waves, something. Okay, all right. So then we could start to think about some of the things that were named, right? So let's have some let's get some conversation going, right? So lessons and carols, how could we adapt it given the circumstances that we find ourselves? What are some ideas? And you can unmute and talk.
Here in Fremont with the Lift community, we are having the 5 churches in their own sanctuaries, hopefully decorated for Christmas, do 2 readings and 2 musical pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Then we'll put that all together and it'll be available to watch at home. It'll be recorded. And 2 of the congregations have projection capability. So people can go to one of those 2 congregations and watch it, assuming we're in our churches at the time. So that's what we're doing here in Fremont for Lift.
And one of the things I absolutely love too is that you're thinking collaboratively, right? If ever we have an excuse to work together, it's this year. We're all online in more ways than ever before. You can Zoom someone in from, my husband supply preached in California, from Ohio, like there are more opportunities to work collaboratively than perhaps ever before. But like what you're doing is great because you're building relationships with local parishes that then could maybe continue after this time. Other ideas of how you're taking something that's sacred and tweaking
it? Can we go to Christmas Eve?
Sure.
Okay.
Let's go.
Well, what we're going to try to do is have an outside, what we're calling a caroling station. So, smaller services inside without singing, but you can come early. We'll have some musicians out in the picnic shelter. sing a couple carols out there, well spaced out. We're going to have luminaries. You get to light a candle. We're bringing our ELCA good gifts, little coin banks in and giving them to baby Jesus in his little manger out there.
Mhm.
Then you can grab a cup of hot chocolate. And if you want, go home. If not, come in for a short service. We'll have a series of 3 or 4 short services throughout the evening.
Cool.
If
Very
it works.
I
God
like
willing.
it. I like it, right? And the great thing about that too is also allows for different levels of comfort, right? So people can stay outside if that's where they're comfortable and still feel connected. They can come inside because people are on all different playing fields about that. I really like that.
In the chat, we've got some from Steve Bowerly. Said one of their youth will sing Silent Night during the outside candle lighting, but then also their oldest member will read the Christmas story from home.
I love it. Yeah, what a great way to connect generations and to provide. And what would that mean to the oldest member of your parish that you're asking them in the midst of this time of isolation to read the Christmas story? I love it. Great.
I like
Sandra.
There are adaptions you've got?
I was thinking about my virtual angel tree idea, and I think it could be done to match the families with the needs, and then it would require maybe additional like funds to mail the gifts to the families for a virtual angel tree.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, that would be great for sure. And there's all kinds of, if you Google, there's all kinds of great searches on how are we doing Christmas tree, the giving tree. Like there's all kinds of different ideas on how to do this. Some outdoors, somewhere you have an online list, and then someone's responsible for putting an ornament on the tree each time someone gives something on the online list. So the tree decorates as people are giving. But a lot of them are moving them outdoors so people can view them in a public. Just kind of cool idea.
Thank you.
I like Rita Bear's idea of using your cell phone light instead of candles if you can't, for whatever reason, do the candles. And I was trying to open up, there actually is an app for your phone where you can have a candle. So it actually looks like a candle that you can wave, but my phone's not, you know, it's not working currently, but that's a good idea.
Yeah, totally a good idea.
We were
Especially when we're
looking
thinking outdoors. Yep.
at Trinity for Christmas Eve. We'll have at least 2 services. One will be earlier. One will be at like 4:30 or 5 o'clock. And the goal is it'll be a living nativity. So little did we know, but here in Findlay, there is an exotic animal farm, and they have camels and they have all kinds of your typical barnyard animals. And we have already contracted with them to bring them over. We'll have people dress up in all the various roles for a typical kind of Christmas Eve program. And it's going to be out in our parking lot, and we will have the animals and the actors process in at the different parts of the service. We'll sing a carol, they'll come in and we'll narrate that part of the story. Another carol will narrate the next part, etc. And ideally it would be a shorter service, much more focused in on families or those who want to get home before it's really dark. But I love the idea of doing hot chocolate and things, and then the animals will be there available for people to come up and see them. And we're hoping that blanketing the neighborhood around us with lots of flyers and posters and whatnot, we can even get people from the community who'd want to come over and, you know, in this very difficult time, experience what the real meaning of Christmas is all about and have that story be front and center. It won't be as liturgical as we typically would have done. In fact, we'll kind of leave a lot of the liturgy stuff behind and let it be the story, and let that be the centerpiece. We will end, we talked about Silent Night. We ordered a bunch of the battery operated candles, and we'll give them to them as they come into the parking lot. And then we'll collect those and wipe them off as they leave the parking lot. But we're hoping that will be a creative way. And then we'll do another service later And we'll try to have to figure out how to do an inside service that has some safety to it. I love the idea of the multiple services with the carols being more between the services rather than during it. Because again, getting away, adapting away from, where we all have to be in there doing the full service for the whole time, but instead, how can we do it in maybe a different way? So great ideas here.
That's great stuff. And really utilizing outdoor spaces, bringing the nativity to life, right? I mean, if ever there was a year for a live nativity, I feel like this is it, right? To utilize that. And then there's all kinds of fun things you can do around that, right? You could tell each of the character stories individually during the Advent season, right? You can have people share their personal nativity and the story of how they got it and why it matters to them, what it reminds them, right? So you can take this like one idea and pull it out in a million different directions and let it be your theme, right? But it's great ideas, and love that you're utilizing local resources.
And
St.
Becky-
John O'Carver. Oh, sorry.
Oh, Sherry, go.
St. John O'Carver, instead of a children's program, are doing a live nativity trailer and then caroling around the town with the kids and adults. I love that. Making it a real community event.
That would have totally flown where I was. People would love that, and they would be out on their porches, clapping and waving and cheering. Yep, great.
So at Hope in Toledo, we're doing a few different things. One of the things we're doing is we're going to do our children's program via video. And the way we're doing that is each family that wants to participate is going to get a scene that they can act out at home and video. And then we're going to edit it together into a video. And the way we've worked that out is one of our traditions that thankfully was not scheduled for this year is Night in Bethlehem, where we do that Bethlehem village in our fellowship hall. So every family is going to get a different shop to portray a scene from at home. And then it's going to be the journey following the star to Bethlehem. And they're going to get a star to pass off in and out of camera. And so every family will legitimately have, like, they can have a different setup, they can have different costumes, they can do whatever they want. And that will still work in an edited Christmas video. So we're doing that for our children's Christmas program. It's going to take some coordination, but the families are excited to do it. Especially we have kids from so many different places. A lot of them aren't comfortable being all together inside anywhere. So that's one thing that we're doing. It also means their grandparents can still see it far away. So they're excited about that. We are also doing an outdoor Christmas Eve service. We've abbreviated it. So we're going to gather in the park across the street at 3:00. And so we are excited about that and hoping for good weather, as I'm sure many, many, many of you are. One other thing that we're trying to do throughout Advent and Christmas is we've invited families, individuals and families, to record special music at home, and then to either post those to our Facebook page every day or to share them as special music during worship. We have so much projection technology at Hope anyway that we're actually still going to have special music during our Advent services. It's just going to be pre-recorded and we're going to play it there in the sanctuary. And then that'll still go out on live stream. So we've tried to lift up the special music gifts and ways to still incorporate that, but do it in a safe fashion.
Yeah, those are great adaptations. Excellent. Like, and I know that if this were my children, like we would be orchestrating huge building projects in our basement, right? To like get that ready. So I think that's like a great way to involve families. And I love that you mentioned that it is a way to reach grandparents, right? Because who's lonely right now? You know, like, so you're also meeting a specific need that this context has brought about, which is just very lovely. Thank you. So we're talking, these are all adaptations, right? They're tweaking something that we already have done, using it in a new way, right? The other thing that I think that we need to kind of spend some time talking about is what we would call innovation, right? So get your chat ready again. This season has brought about new needs. What are some of the new needs that you're seeing in your parish, in your community, that maybe weren't there before or have been intensified because of this place in which we live, this time in which we live? And if you ladies could shout them out when they come in.
Interaction.
Uh-huh.
Incorporating shut-ins and people that we know are isolated and staying at home.
Mm-hmm.
Folks who are being evicted in this time, and also who might be lacking food.
Yes, very much so.
Considering safety more than we ever have before, and that can also mean a lot of different things in terms of providing safe worship spaces.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Other needs that I have, so grief is heavy right now, right? Grief is heavy in a million different ways. If ever there was a time for a blue Christmas, hello, this is the season, right? That would be something that would have been in something entirely new that I had never done before. But I think you don't each need to plan one, but couldn't every community have one? Couldn't this be a collaborative sort of thing that could be done to offer people some sense of naming the grief that is just kind of heavy in a lot of our world right now.
Sarah, do you mind if I pitch, just let folks know that we do have in November 19th and 20th, Dr. Carla Dahl from Luther Seminary is doing a 6-hour, it's 9 to 12 on the November 19th, and then on November 20th, she's presenting on ambiguous loss. It's a conference that is really dealing with losses that we are experiencing now. This just ambiguous, the grief that you talked about. So ambiguous means, of course, that we can't always name it, and it's things that we're not used to losing, but it's there and it's underlying. So Caroline will be sending that information out so that you know when that is, but certainly we would love to have you. I think she's going to be very, very good. Just to help us get ready for winter and the holidays. So
yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's great. So we have lots of loneliness right now. So it has a question of how do we create things for people to interact in ways that are safe and be intentional about it, so that what we don't do is get tired and then all of a sudden have a big party, right? Because we're desperate for connection. So what would it mean if for caroling, if it were as a family unit who was assigned 4 families and they went and stood outside their house and sang a Christmas carol? And we would do phone trees all the time. Could we have a caroling tree? Where family units go and sing to others. Nobody's going to care whether you're in tune. What they're going to care about is whether someone remembered them and paid attention to them. One that I'm learning about in the midst of this time is really practical needs in our shelters and our poverty ministries. So everyone is doing takeout meals right now. So we need silverware, we need bottled water, we need containers that meals can be transported in. Meat costs have gone up. So if you are, this is a perfect year for one of those Advent charts where you give something each day. And if I were going to do it, I would be calling my local pantry and asking, what do they really need, right? Not just inserting things in, but what are, I know If I call Cindy from Cindy's Corner, she's going to say, I pay so much money for silverware right now, Pastor Sarah. It's so frustrating. I pay so much money for bottled water, right? Perfect donations. How about any others? So things that can be created because of the particular needs that we're finding that are in the midst of this season. So we're talking about innovations that are context specific.
Pastor Becky, can you explain what reverse Advent is for your transitional shelters?
Yeah, it's kind of like what Sarah was talking about. Instead of opening the Advent and getting candies or whatever out of the little windows for the 24 days leading up to Christmas, we contacted Cherry Street Mission and a couple other transitional shelters and asked for their needs. And so everybody will get a list of what the needs are. And the idea is to put it in a prominent place in your house and every day put one thing into that, including bottled water. Now this year, of course, masks, face masks for shelters, always socks and underwear, always socks and underwear, and have it prominent. And then also, not just put it in, but then talk about the needs that people in very different situations have. And then also for food pantries, or I'm sure there's many other ways to do that, but we're doing it for transitional shelters.
I love the education too that's accompanying that. So like giving something, but actually helping, because you don't know that this is needed unless you're in that community, right? Mm-hmm. So yes. It's a great idea. Other thoughts on specific kind of innovations that we're doing in the midst to address the needs of this time?
I'll just mention one other thing that we're doing, and I think it does meet the need for community. With St. Paul's UCC, we're doing, I don't know if you're familiar with Advent Conspiracy. It's a movement that has been around, but focuses on, worship fully, love all. It's an effort to tone down Christmas away from spending lots of money to, kind of making people and Jesus the center of Christmas and being generous. And so we have a Zoom book study that we'll do together for the weeks of Advent. And they're actually part of that is to do something for somebody in the community. So that aspect of that is the reverse Advent. So.
Love it. Yeah, good. I love it. And it also meets the need for people are lonely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. One thing that I've done in the past is I have there are services that allow you to send out mass texts to people who sign up that are relatively inexpensive, and I've texted out the Passion Story during Holy Week in real time to people. I don't know how that would work with the Christmas story. It's a little less definite by an hour by hour basis, but I could see doing an Advent text devotional where people could sign up to receive a text a day or a devotional thought a day. We use easytexting.com, but there are a variety of other services out there that you could use.
And I can just testify that you should steal this idea from Ed, because I did and my people loved it, right? The texting out the passion narrative. And I would imagine they would love an Advent, a way to have like in the midst of life, just little kind of reminders of the season that they're in.
Cool. Thanks.
So you should definitely steal that idea from Ed, right?
Thank you, Sarah.
Any other thoughts or ideas before we kind of move into, I just want to do some time for sharing too, and a couple practical things that I've discovered as preparing for this.
One of the things that we're doing, we picked up on the dinner church theme and knowing how important for our community, the Advent meal leading right into Advent worship. And so what we're going to be doing is we'll make up a very, very simple meal. It might, like the first week might be Little Caesar's pizza, and every family can sign up to get a pizza. They come up to church at 5:30. They will let us know ahead of time through Sign Up Genius that they want to participate. So we have enough pizzas, but they can come up at 5:30, pick up their pizza, take it home. They'll get a Zoom link. And then when they get home, then they will all log in as families together at between 6:15 and 6:30, have a little time for conversation with each other. Especially the smaller kids love to see each other's houses and squeak and squawk at each other. But then after that, then we'll do very brief devotionals, like a little recorded video piece. That's part of the Advent story. And then have just a simple prayer. We'll have some children's music. Our various children's choirs are preparing things for Christmas anyway. So there'll be a chance for each one of those each week. Each family's musicians, quote unquote, will share something. But the whole thing is intended just to get families to spend time. We're talking about coming home for Advent and Christmas. And the idea of, just as we saw back in the spring around the Lenten Holy Week, so many families were gathering, watching the worship services together. They're spending time watching video devotionals. We want to encourage people in Advent to do the same thing. And we thought this is a way they could do it together and see each other and visit with each other, because everybody wants to get together, and everybody just thinks that because we can't get together physically in the building, well, then there goes everything. And now we can't have nice things anymore. Without realizing that you can still do this, and it could be really cool, and it could be really uplifting if they give it a shot. So we're hoping that people will try it, and it might start people considering the fact that they could do some kind of Zoom gathering instead of having to get together and spread COVID. So we're hopeful.
I love it. Dinner church is a great idea, especially I think in the midst of times when people are lonely. I know, so my kids are home all the time, so we're cooking all meals for them. How many times I have to feed these people, right? Like they're always hungry, right? So one meal where you could pick it up at the church and not have to worry about it would be well received for young families.
We're doing a similar thing at our smaller congregation with soup that you pick up and do virtual worship. The other thing I wanted to share is that we are also gathering our in-house Advent devotions around the Advent wreath this year. So we've got one of our shepherd groups making Advent wreaths for our shut-ins, and they're going to deliver them. And then we've got some ideas that we're putting out on our Facebook page, but we're really going to shoot for everybody to have a home Advent wreath. We're going to send them an Advent calendar and a daily devotional. And then every day we're going to get on Facebook Live and light the candle or candles for the week and read that devotion and sing a hymn, so that every family has that home around the table Advent experience.
Yeah, that's excellent. There are all kinds of resources coming out right now about home boxes, right? So you get all the supplies to make your own Advent wreath at home, or you get all the supplies to do family devotions, or you get all the supplies to make your own nativity, and you deliver these to families. They do them together, and it becomes home worship, right? But you're giving them the resources to do that well, and so they get this lovely present from the church, right? And then they have some sort of guided practice. And then what I love about that is that it also then pulls back and you have this moment to interact with your community, because you're lighting your candles together online at a particular time, right? So it's this intimacy of your family, but then you're remembering that your family's connected to a bigger family. Lovely.
Jean Wise put in the comments, I don't know if everybody saw, but I think it's a good question and some people might have ideas of how are people making adaptations and innovations to all of these remote and virtual possibilities, keeping in mind people who have either no internet or computer usage literacy, and how do we bring them into the fold of all of these ideas?
Yep. Yeah, these are really great kind of conversations, right? I know pastors, just as one thing, I know pastors who are not getting rid of their wagons, who are still having people drive up, because in your car you can turn on the heat and they can put on a jacket and maybe some long underwear too. But they can lead worship outdoors, and it is just what's practical for their community, because there are folks who are never going to get online, but they will put the heat on in their car and they will drive to the church and turn on to the radio. It's just an idea. I'm sure others have different kind of ideas.
I would think that the kind of gift from the church idea, Sarah, that you were talking about would be a way to at least give resources and reading material and those kinds of things for our people who can't do the digital, you know. So it might include they can't, you know, log on at 6 o'clock for dinner church, but they could go into prayer and they could say a prayer for those who were you know, doing the Zoom thing. So somehow be interactive and part of that event, even though they can't necessarily do it virtually, and or partner folks who don't have that literacy with young people that do, and somehow that partnership could elicit some teaching and some really cool intergenerational relationship as well.
Yeah, very cool.
Oh, one thing that I'm contemplating, because we're still wrestling with how to come back inside because we have small space. And so then that becomes a huge issue for Christmas Eve. And since I have a lot of elderly, I love the idea of Christmas caroling outside. I just don't think they'll do it because they aren't going to stand out in the cold. So I'm toying with the idea, and I'm wondering if anybody's come across any resources for this, of having a walk-through Christmas Eve service so that people can just do a continuous stream, and they can come in, and perhaps we can have stations where there could be you know, the Christmas story, there could be a nativity blessing, there could be communion, and then at some point they could cycle back out. Maybe there'd be a soloist, maybe there'd be a spot to do Silent Night with candles with their own family unit before they exit. We'd probably have to take them upstairs and then down through the fellowship hall. But I don't really know how I can get people in the building for any kind of gathering on Christmas Eve. And I have such a high percentage of people that can't do online. I've been tracking numbers, and it's a very small number. Most of the people watching our online stuff aren't even members of our church.
Yeah.
So does anybody have?
I do.
Kind of,
what you're talking about is what they're calling stations of the nativity.
Okay.
And so so like we would have stations of the cross, you know, and you would move from place to place, and there would be a particular part of the story that is told at each particular place. And so this is just the nativity story done like that, right? And some of them are done in community, some of them are done in a church building, some of them are done outdoors, depending on what you want to do and what the availability is. Some of them are just, you read a particular part of the story and engage in a devotion or a piece of art at each site. Some of them have interactive things for you to do at each of the stations. But there are all kinds of resources online. What you're looking for are stations of the nativity. And if you go to the Synod page, we're going to give you the resource page. I linked a couple different resources and books on that there. But you're right on, right? Pastor Julie, like there are people thinking about this and who will think about it with you. And it is exactly what you described, is the idea of stations of the nativity.
At Trinity, we'll be doing that in our parking lot one of the first weekends of Advent after service. We're coordinating it in with what we call our take-home Sunday school. So the kids pick up a bag at the beginning of the month. It has everything that the family needs to do Sunday school together. And so what we'll do then is on the, we didn't call it Stations of the Nativity, but that's a great name, or Stations of Advent. But it's basically the same idea. Set up around the parking lot will be different interactive sites that families can go, and they can do a craft. We'll be collecting food at one station, so there's a chance to give. There'll be other things at other stations, all related to aspects of the Advent and/or Nativity stories, and specifically those lessons that they are encouraged to do at home. And these are separate from what we would do necessarily on our Wednesday nights. But, again, trying to get more of, we have a preschool, so trying to get the preschool families to engage and participate in this too. So yeah, it's a great idea. I will look for the Stations of the Nativity on the Synod site, because that could help us just have a couple more ideas for what some of our stations might look like.
Yeah, and all of these resources, I mean, you can take them and then adapt them to work for your place, right? There's no need for you to look up all the verses. They've got them there, right? You can take that and then adapt it to work in your place. And there's books written on this too, on Stations of the Nativity, and there's a link for that as well on that page.
One thing, and Janine Shearer brought it up, and it's good to remember, is that for Zoom, you can have people call in. And so she said that they're committed to using Zoom for everything. So that way people can chime in via video or phone. So that might take some education depending on your context and how comfortable people are using Zoom. But that would also be a good way to incorporate people who are staying at home. And it's also a good reminder to do that, to keep in mind how visual your worship is. And so if you are doing things through Zoom, if someone's calling in and can only hear and not see, what are you, like, will that be as much of an experience for them, which is a great way to make worship accessible for all people. So yeah, that's
I like
to have people call in for worship.
Jared has people that call in for his worship when they do it online, and that's how they participate. Also, we did this in the beginning of the pandemic, and I just think it's still very practical. So like at the beginning of the pandemic, we identified some of the shut-ins, and we just went and sang a song outside. We stood on the lawn and we sang a camp song. Out of tune, but I got more thank you notes and things of appreciation for that than I think maybe anything else. So thinking of Christmas Eve, if you know who can't come, right? If you have a list of those people, like what would it mean to like go knock on their door, hang a mechanical candle on the doorknob, right, for them to light, go stand out in the lawn, sing one verse of Silent Night, have them light their candle, and then read John, the verse from John. I mean, that will take a couple minutes at most, right? If you had a team of people, I think they could love that, right? I mean, that would be a meaningful way to spend the earlier hours of Christmas Eve. A couple of notes that I found interesting that in my research for this, and then we'll kind of go to any other ideas that you have before we show you resources and where the resources are going to be landing. And if you have ideas, please send them in, like share them with your brothers and sisters in Christ. There is no need for us all to like be creating the same things, right? And send in what you have, and they will tweak it to work in their context, right? You can send resources to me, you can send them to Caroline, you can put them in the chat. But a couple things that I wanted to, because I thought this was very fascinating. So we're all talking about doing outdoor worship during this time of year for like maybe the first time, right? We've never done it in the cold. There are people who do this all the time, right? It's skiers and snowboarders for Christ. And I actually met someone who participated in this ministry. She is a military kid who lives out in Colorado, and they do outdoor worship services on the ski lift on the mountains before they go skiing. And so some practical advice from those folks on doing outdoor worship. So the pastor there, he says, when he starts to preach, he takes his glove off. When his hand starts to hurt, the sermon is done. Amen. Right? Like that's his practical kind of a note. So, but just to highlight, it needs to be shorter, right? If you're doing outdoors, it needs to be shorter. He said it needs to be bigger. right? People won't catch the subtleties. So if you're doing something outdoors, inflate it, make it bigger. He said, be okay with okay. That it's not going to look like in your sanctuary where everything is tailored and pristine and like, you know, very orchestrated. And it's not gonna look like that. It's gonna be a little messier, a little more organic. Be okay with just okay. He said, engage your surroundings and use them to your advantage. Keep it interactive. And he said, short is sweet, right? You're not talking about an hour-long worship service if you're doing it outdoors. You're talking 20 minutes, 15 minutes, maybe offering it multiple times, but letting it be a lot shorter than you would typically do. So I found those really fascinating kind of advice from folks who do this all the time, right? Who engage outdoor worship as a normal way to work with each other. All right, so I want to open it up. If you have any other ideas that are just burning inside you that your brothers and sisters in Christ need to hear about, or something that you need some tweaking with, right? You just you have this idea and you're wondering if anyone else is thinking about this or any other resources are available. I want to open it up. Any of those sitting there? Anyone have lovely ideas that they're super excited about that other people just need to hear about?
I was just kind of taking the whole notion of going from house to house and thinking that perhaps you could even divide it up into 4 Advent opportunities, assigning a family who would record what happens and then use that montage of recordings for 4 Sundays of Advent as the Sunday after Christmas lessons and carols presentation.
Yeah.
And then everyone would have a chance to share a little bit of the story and yet hear the whole story in the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it would connect people together, which would be good too. Mm-hmm.
If I were in a community,
I was writing in
if I were in a community that was relatively small, I would try to do your outdoor services as carolers, is move from place to place through the town, maybe go to different corners and do a portion of the service each place and move back to the church then for whatever final thing you were doing. So you basically go around the block, if you will, or however you could do it in a small town or community, go around the block and stop at each intersection and do what you're going to do and then move back to the church. Something like that would work out as well. Relatively short service gets folks outside moving, which will be warmer than standing around, and then perhaps also be a witness to the community.
Yeah, yep.
I was going to say, I was writing in the comments that at a former parish I served, we had 2 services on Christmas Eve, and every year between the services, we would take homemade cookies and goodies, because everybody always has extras that time of year, and we would box it up. We would put a card from our congregation and a copy of the Christmas story, and then we would take it to all the first responders working on Christmas Eve. Mm-hmm. So the police, the firemen, the ambulance drivers, the dispatchers, the hospital ERs, and we couldn't really read the story to them when we came in, but they were always thrilled to get it, and then they had it when they were on break.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great way to incorporate and provide for the needs of the community. I'm going to pull out this math sheet too. Okay, we're all multitasking in the midst of the season, right? Okay, here you go. All right. So that also highlights another thing that I think is really important that we talked about, right? Which is food, right? So we can't eat the way that we did, but you could put a couple cookies in a bag and hand it to people as they're leaving. You know, you could have packets of hot chocolate that they take home, you know, and ask people to take a picture later. So not totally neglecting this because we can't do it the way that we always have. Right? Because we all know food is, I mean, when we asked what was sacred during this time, it's one of the things that come up. So thinking of innovations for that as well. other ideas you feel like you need to share before we show you a resource page? Thoughts?
One quick idea, just when you were just talking about food that I had been thinking about, but then hadn't done anything with, is sending out a like, hey, do you want to share your favorite family recipe or your favorite cookie recipe? Yeah. Like if we can't share the potluck meals and stuff, maybe we can share recipes, and people are cooking at home and need new ideas. Mm-hmm. So that might be a way to kind of engage food that isn't necessarily church, but is community related.
Yeah, that would be super fun, especially like what if you had like 4 and you did one each Advent every Wednesday, you know, and you ask people to like cook this together in your family. Let's see how it turns out, right? What did you like? Or you had people give the recipe for their favorite Christmas cookie, you know, like and ask people to be creative, right? That's a great idea, I think. And it will let people tell a little bit of their own story too, which is really helpful. All right. Any other kind of ideas before we kind of move into closing up?
I just learned about this lantern parade in place, so that folks make their own lanterns. And of course, instead of parading, they hang them either in their windows, but this is actually in Hilton Head, but I think it could be adapted really, really well, that churches could provide the materials to make, of course, safe lanterns that could be, let go. But the arts and the crafts, the light of Advent, it could be really, really cool if everyone hung their lanterns at the same time. It might, in a community, that could be just really cool.
Yeah, very cool. There's also really great with lanterns on the longest night of resources, where you have people get their bag, they decorate it around who they're remembering or the grief that they're observing, bring it back to the church, they put sand in it, they put a little battery operated candle, and then there's a time when they're going to fill up the parking lot or fill up the path along the church, and people can just drive
That's cool.
Around the neighborhood, and they're all there. So like think relay for life, right? Around the track, but doing it around a neighborhood and doing it around the grief that we're observing in the midst of this.
Really cool. I think Anne asked if anyone did the longest night worship. I'm not sure we had highlighted that. So
there are resources on the page for that, and I think it's a great idea to do this year. It kind of leads really well into this next thing that I just want to highlight, is that please don't do all of this on your own. I mean, I know the pressure, and you want to make it perfect. You want to be with your people. You're feeling a lot of weight and pressure. Please don't do all of this on your own. If ever there is a year where you can buddy with people and other pastors and rostered leaders, create resources together. Don't do 25 longest nights of Christmas services. Get 5 or 6 people together and do one. I really think this is a time when we can kind of collaborate intentionally. And I know you're carrying a lot of weight, and it's easier to do that when you're standing next to somebody. So find ways to collaborate and use resources that others have started and that you're adapting, or that you're doing together. Okay? I'm saying that as someone who spent 10 years in the parish and who knows that the pressure to do that, right? Work with your buddies. Any other thoughts before we pull up a resource page? All right, I want to show you the resource page. I'm going to add things to it. If you have things that you would like to share, if you can email them to either Caroline or me, or put them in the chat, I'll try to collect some of the ideas that we talked about that aren't on the page and add them up to it. Caroline, could you show them where it is though?
Yeah, so if you go to our website, the easiest way to get there would be to go to nwos-elca.church/resources/ /Advent, and we'll send this link out so you don't have to remember that, but that'd be the easiest way. And there is a whole page that Pastor Sarah and our wonderful technology specialist Brent have been working on.
Yeah. And there are lots of, because I love them, there are lots of resources on children and family, because that's the stuff that I find fun. We marked some of the things that there are some resources that you have to purchase, right? So we're trying to mark those with $signs, knowing that there'll be some cost involved to that. And then we're trying to leave the other ones. There are free resources. Okay. And like I said, if you can contribute your ideas, we will add them to this page. Okay, we can go back yes, thank you. I just want to end with a blessing. Let me pull it up. All right, maybe. Let's try this again. One second, folks, sorry. Okay. All right. If you bow your heads, remember we stick with this, the light shines in the darkness and the darkness did not overcome it. So as you're heading out, I want to give you a blessing. This blessing is by Jan Richardson. Blessed are you who bear the light in unbearable times, who testify to its endurance amid the unendurable, who bear witness to its persistence when everything else seems in shadow and grief. Blessed are you in whom the light lives, in whom the brightness blazes, your heart a chapel, an altar where in the deepest night can be seen the fire that shines forth in you, in unaccountable faith, in stubborn hope, in love that illuminates everything that it finds. So blessings to you in the midst of this planning season, brothers and sisters in Christ. If you need to dream with somebody, call us. And if you have resources to share, send them our way and we'll make sure they get on the Synod page. Thanks for your time. Thanks for coming, guys. Thanks for jumping in, ladies, and reading for me.
That was really awesome.
Yeah. We had some good participation, so that's good.
Very good. Yeah.
Caroline, can we save the chat, because I can sift through it for ideas to add up to the Synod website.
Yep, and if it doesn't automatically save, I just took screenshots of everything, so we will have it.
All right. I'll see you ladies later today.
Yep.
All right.
Great job.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.